Why you fear your own potential. The strangest prison is the one you lock from the inside and then forget where you hid the key. You explain the bars to yourself as fate or timing or a sensible caution. But there is a quieter, more subversive truth you resist naming. You are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of what happens if you stop failing. It sounds like heresy against the common sense of ambition, but listen to the way your body tightens when the path suddenly clears. When a door opens not because you kicked it, but because it was never locked. Your throat goes dry. Your mind invents errands. You tidy the desk. You sharpen the pencil to anneal. You announce to the empty room that you are preparing. The page remains blank like a horizon judging you. You say you are overwhelmed. Maybe. But overwhelmed by what? Opportunity can be louder than any alarm. And attention yours, theirs has the sting of a spotlight. You wanted light. You did not prepare for heat. Fear of your own potential is not stupidity or laziness. It is a strategy with a history. It keeps you safe from consequences that are older than your resume. Villages have long memories. They remember what happens to tall poppies. They are cut. They remember the nail that sticks up, hammered. From the pulpit to the factory floor, from kitchen tables to school desks, 1,000 small sermons have suggested that modesty means staying small, that aspiration must be disguised as humility, that the river should pretend it does not intend to reach the sea. But you are water, and somewhere in you knows the coast exists. The scandal is that getting closer to it could cost you what kept you alive on the inland. Potential is not just possibility. It is danger. The danger that you will no longer be innocuous. The danger that some season of your life will end and be unrecoverable. The danger that you will call down envy from people you love, or leave behind the version of you they learn to trust. You fear your potential, because potential is not just achievement. It is change. And change is the true predator in the grass. If you are honest, you have been circling the perimeter of your own capacity, like a night watchman. Procrastination looks like laziness, until you ask why it always peaks near the threshold of something that matters. Why do your best ideas arrive in the shower or in traffic, and then evaporate on arrival at the desk? Why do you polish outlines, syllabi, gear lists, a priest of preparation, while the altar remains empty? The mind is clever. It builds a moat of busyness around the castle of the actual work. On the drawbridge is a sign. Please knock. We have standards. You do not need standards to hide behind if you truly plan to open the door. The origin story is traceable. Perhaps you were the child who won a prize and watched a friend look away and learn, in that stomach-tightening silence, that excellence can be a thief. It steals company. Perhaps you were the daughter who surpassed her father's schooling and saw the pride in his eyes flicker into a confusion he tried to swallow, and you felt in your bones that your success could be a quiet insult to someone you loved. Perhaps you grew in a place where standing out looked like arrogance, where there were sanctions for being conspicuous. Gossip, distance, laughter sharpened into knives. You learned to bend. Bending became a doctrine, disguised as prudence. Even if your biography differs, the culture prints similar messages in heavy type. The industrial age sculpted time into measurable units and taught you to be measurable within them. Schools ranked you. Offices appraised you. Metrics made the invisible visible. Charts of your productivity, leaderboards of your worth. Visibility is power, they said. Visibility is also exposure. When you are seen, you can be attacked. When you are invisible, you can survive. Potential drags you toward the light against the old animal's will. Listen to how myths whisper the same caution in different costumes. Icarus flew too high. Prometheus stole fire and paid. Ambitious witches were drowned. Uppity slaves were whipped. Heretical thinkers were burned or exiled. The lesson is crude, but effective. Do not exceed your assigned orbit. We pretend those stories are distant educational museum pieces behind glass. The fear is not behind glass. It is in your gut when you sense you've written something true. It is in the tremor of your finger hovering over send. It is in the way your voice drops when you talk about the project that matters. The body remembers punishments it has never personally received. There is another layer, subtler, almost tender. You fear the unrecognizable self your own potential could deliver. Limitation is a kind of identity. I am not a leader. I am not sporty. I am not brave. I am shy. These are names you learned the way. People learn small towns by walking them daily until the streets feel inevitable. What if you are wrong? What if you could do the thing you've avoided? The relief would be real. So would the grief. You would have to mourn the person who kept you safe by pretending to be smaller. You are not ready for that funeral. So you keep the old friend around. Self-sabotage is devotion in disguise. You drink the extra glass of wine the night before the interview. Schedule the important call during a commute. Decide to clean under the fridge at the exact moment you promised to write. This is not random. This is your nervous system protecting you from the abyss beyond accomplishment. Because after you step into the new room, after you publish, perform, build, confess, rise, then there is the question you most dread. What now? Potential is stubborn that way. It refuses to be satisfied. It turns a summit into a saddle and points you to the next range. You fear it because you suspect it will never let you rest. The tragedy is that fear is persuasive because it has saved you before. It helped you dodge humiliation. It protected relationships. It kept you in the family. It was the bodyguard that pulled you out of rooms where the air turned toxic. Now it frisks your pockets every time you try to pass through a new doorway. It hides the key to the cell you built. It's not malicious. It's confused about where the threat is coming from. We call it fear of success, but the title is misleading. The fear is of the tax success might levy. Tax is like responsibility. People will expect things from you. Tax is like visibility. People will see you and misunderstand. Tax is like envy. People will turn your face into a screen and project their regret upon it. Tax is like distance. Old friends will step back and new ones will step forward, and you will miss the ease of not being a question to anyone. We prefer to fail privately than to succeed and be said to have changed. The old world agrees and supplies cautionary proverbs. The Japanese say the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Australians cut down tall poppies. In some towns, the phrase, "Who do you think you are?" is an incantation that keeps miracles from happening in daylight. You internalize these spells and start to cast them on yourself preemptively. You choose the smaller job. You defer the application. You call your ambition by a safer name: hobby, phase, whim. Your potential waits like a dog at the door that you shush because the neighbors might complain. History is a stern tutor here. It tells us that societies evolve, leveling mechanisms to keep groups cohesive. Hunters who bragged too loudly were mocked. Chiefs who accumulated too much became targets. These were sane systems in environments where individual advantage could mean collective vulnerability. But the mechanism does not retire kindly. It lingers as an itch under the skin of modern life. You scratch it when you over-apologize for wanting more. You scratch it when you pad your vision with disclaimers. You scratch it into a wound and then call the wound humility. And yet, another history runs under this one. The story of those who risked being seen and were not annihilated, but enlarged. The enslaved person who learned to read by candle stub and passed that light along. The daughter who left home and found a larger family. The craftsman who brought a new technique to a guild that pretended nothing could be improved. When we list the heroes on the statues, we forget the private price they paid, but we also forget the private price of everyone who didn't step. Those ledgers are not recorded. Their cost is measured in lives that never were. The descent, then, is not about shaming yourself for not leaping. It is about admitting the scale of the thing you are asking of yourself. To become what you could become, means risking becoming someone you do not yet recognize, someone who might stand out in a room, someone whose orbit widens until some familiar stars grow small. In the dust that kicks up, your instincts will call it danger. Some of it is. Most of it is grief. The fear that stops you is often a grief whose name you've never learned to say. So pause here, on the lip of the ravine, and look down honestly. Your potential is not a staircase with handrails. It is a river with a current you cannot fully control. Stepping in will wash off some of the names you've carried. It will separate you from some banks you love. It will insist you learn a swimmer's trust. That is frightening. It is also how you get anywhere other than the place where you've been circling. The question is not whether you are afraid. The question is whether the life you are protecting still deserves this much protection. Let us walk into the engine room and see how the fear machine works. Not to blame it, but to understand its architecture. Begin with this. Desire and dread often travel on the same rail. The moment you imagine a fuller life, your nervous system runs a simulation of the losses that might accompany it. The sequence is ancient approach, then flinch. You did not design this. Your ancestors handed it down, wrapped in stories where the hero brings fire and the village burns, where the woman who speaks is named trouble, where the child who wanders is called ungrateful. The point was to keep the group intact. The cost was that gifted children learned to swallow their own light. Inside you, that group has become a council of voices. Some are kind, many are anxious. They sit in a mental town hall you visit whenever you consider moving beyond the boundary. An uncle clears his throat. A teacher straightens the papers. A friend from a winter you survived asks if you think you're better than them now. A younger version of you presses their small palms to your cheeks and says, "Please don't get us in trouble." You call it caution or self-critique, but it is governance, an inner politics of belonging. Every vote must be counted, so nothing moves. Add to this another subtle dynamic. The world rewards predictability, systems like stable nodes. You may be suffocating, but you are a stable node. People know how to relate to you when you inhabit a certain range. When you step beyond it, you become work. They must recalibrate. They must change the story of you. Many do not want to. They can love you and still resist your grow. Not because they're villains, but because your expansion threatens to tug on the net that holds their days together. Your fear intuits this accurately. It asks, is your oxygen worth their discomfort? If you are kind, your first answer is no. Your potential grows quiet out of politeness. Now the body. Fear is not just a thought. It is a felt geometry of the chest, a shortening of breath, a thermal shift at the skin. Your animal learns, standing out got us punished. Standing down kept us alive. Next time you near the line, the stomach flips, the throat tightens, sweat arrives early like bad weather. Many call this a sign. Listen to your body, they say. Good advice, wrong interpretation. The body is telling you nothing about truth. It is telling you about precedent. It is a historian, not a prophet. There is a craft to hiding that you have practiced well. You make yourself indispensable in the wrong place. You excel at safe tasks. You become the person others lean on so that your hands stay too full to pick up your own tools. You hunt for more certificates while the work that wants you paces the hallway. You mistake tidiness for progress. This is less about cowardice than about controlling the terms of exposure. You want to be seen only under favorable conditions, good light, perfect script, applause guaranteed. Potential refuses this negotiation. It insists on rehearsal in public, on false starts, on being clumsy where you might be witnessed. This is where most people quit. They call it timing and wait for the day that never comes. Peer deep into the contradiction at the center. You fear being too much and not enough at the same time. Too much for your circle, not enough for your dream. You're afraid your talent will outgrow the room and that the next room won't take you. So you stand in the doorway, holding the jam, rehearsing the speech you'll use to explain why you're still there. The psyche is merciful. It will generate endless explanations to keep you from confronting the bluntness of the truth. The door is open, and you are scared. Consider also the rituals of belonging you inherited. Families whisper their values without words. We don't move far. We don't make waves. We don't speak first. We don't forgive that kind of person. We don't leave that kind of job. We don't marry outside this orbit. To violate these is to be welcomed by a silence that hums. Human beings will do almost anything not to be exiled. If the price of membership is restraint, most of us will pay. It is a logical payment in a world where survival depended on proximity. But your present does not live under the same sky as your ancestors' fear. It lives under a roof you can open. History illustrates the pattern with brutal consistency. Communities have pruned their outliers with principle. In guilds, apprentices were discouraged from innovating. They were told tradition was safety. In courts, women with too much influence were named temptresses and removed. In classrooms, kids from the wrong side of town learned to aim lower because the ceiling was made of teachers' eyes, not architecture. Revolutions offered new permissions, and then committees burned books to guard the new permission. The story repeats so faithfully that you can forgive your body for anticipating punishment. It is reading from a very old script. Yet there is another story, woven like gold thread through the fabric. Each epic has its figures who move differently within the same constraints. They do not wait for permission. They do not make war on their village. They do not disdain the ones who stay. They simply go, and in going, they invent a trail. The essay published without connections. The business started without capital. The apology given in a lineage that never apologized. Not all are canonized. Most are unrecorded. But you have met them. They remind you that potential is not a throne. It is a path you walk until the path becomes a bridge others can cross. What of the fear of arrogance? Many keep themselves small to avoid becoming what hurt them. The teacher who lorded over a classroom, the manager who confused cruelty with excellence. You told yourself a story. Power corrupts, so I will refuse it. A noble vow, but incomplete. Refusing capacity to avoid corruption is like refusing water to avoid drowning. The solution is not to starve. It is to learn to swim. There is a humility that arises from contact with the real, the kind, that keeps you human as you grow. And there is a false humility that is just pride wearing a sackcloth costume. False humility says, I'll keep my gifts hidden so I don't upset anyone. The secret pride inside it says, my comfort is worth more than the help my gifts could provide. And help is the correct word. One reason you fear your own potential is that you have framed it as self-expansion rather than as service. If becoming more means demanding more applause, more space, more I, then of course your inner village protests. But if becoming more means carrying more, creating more shelter, passing more light, then the fear recalibrates. Not vanishes fear as stubborn, but softens. The burden shifts from who do you think you are to who else could you become to be of use. If the work moves through you rather than toward you, you are less likely to choke on it. The identity problem remains. The roles you inhabit are heavy with history. To step outside them is to become a beginner again. Beginners stumble. Experts are efficient. The fear of losing competence is among the most paralyzing forces in adult life. You would rather be excellent in a narrow room than awkward in a larger one. This is how talent ossifies. It's also how despair sets in quietly, a life padded with things you are good at, starved of what you are called to. The mind tries one last tactic. It confuses potential with destiny. If you do not realize it fully, you will be a disappointment. This absolutism sources your panic. It loads every decision with metaphysics. But potential is not a sentence. It is a range. It is a field you can play in 10 minutes at a time. Being afraid of your potential at this scale begins to look like superstition. What, exactly, are you avoiding? Writing one paragraph today? Asking one person for help? Trying the thing for 15 minutes and seeing what breaks? At this resolution, the fear reveals its anatomy, a rumor grown large in darkness. Then there is the realm of envy, your own and others. You fear encountering both. To grow is to come into contact with the envy of those who will tell themselves a story about you to soothe their alarms. You cannot manage that narrative without shrinking. You also fear your own envy of those already moving, because to admit it is to name your hunger, and hunger is risky. But envy is information. It points at a territory your life wants. Treat it not as a bruise to be hidden, but as a compass you can steal. Finally, we must speak of the weather that will not clear, the world's harshness. There will be hecklers. There will be rooms that do not receive you. There will be numbers that refuse to climb. The fear is not entirely imaginary. It is also anticipatory grief about these facts. So tell the truth to yourself. You will be hurt. You will lose some comforts. You will, if you succeed beyond a certain point, become the kind of figure people use without your consent as symbol or target. This is not a reason to hide. It is a reason to prepare not with armor, but with a circle of people who will remind you that you are not your visibility. You are a person doing a thing, then resting, then doing it again. And in the thick of it, remember the backward law. The more you try to avoid the heat of being seen by planning perfectly, the more the heat finds you in the form of delay, self-loathing, and complexity without movement. The water teaches better. It holds what enters it. It changes shape around the swimmer. It neither resists nor retreats. When you stop fighting the fact that the river is wet, you can learn to float. When you stop fighting the fact that your life wants to become itself, you can begin to practice instead of pretending to prepare. Revelation does not always arrive like a trumpet. Sometimes it is a quiet word in the throat. Enough. Enough arguing with your own tide. Enough loyalty to your smallness. Enough bargaining with the door. What if your potential is not the monster under the bed, but the hand you keep slapping away in the dark? The shift lives in a single adjustment, from performance to participation. Participation is the correction of the myth. Potential is not a throne you ascend, crowned and isolated. It is a music you join, off-key at first, and with competence that grows from the union of error and attention. When you reframe your fear this way, everything lowers by a few inches. The stakes shrink to human scale. You do not have to become your highest self. You have to do the next faithful thing with the resources at hand. You have to begin and let the beginning humble you. Expertise is a form of intimacy, not a proof. Titles can mislead. Contact cannot. The deepest knot loosens when you realize this. The point of your becoming is not to adorn your biography, but to increase your capacity to give and receive. That is all success amounts to, at close range, an expanded ability to carry more meaning, make more room, steward more care. All the other symbols, numbers, followers, trophies, are shadows on the wall. They can be useful. They can also be traps. If your fear is fed by the imagination of those shadows, start it by returning to the substance. The thing itself in your hands now. But what of the village that will not approve? Here an older form of loyalty becomes available. Not loyalty to comfort, but to inheritance. You are the living bet your ancestors made. Many could not read, travel, choose. Many made themselves small to avoid attracting a history that hunted them. Some prayed, whether they said prayer or not, that a child's life would open where theirs closed. When you stay small to honor them, you mistake the offering. To honor them is to accept the opening they labored for. To show them, if you still speak to them in the kitchen before sunrise, that their suffering bought something real, your latitude. Take it and walk. The fear of leaving people behind is tender and must be handled as such. You cannot carry everyone. You cannot convince everyone. But you can refuse the false binary that says your growth requires contempt. It does not. You can leave the room with your palm open, not your fist closed. You can become a person who returns with bread. This is what a mature potential does. It builds a table. It becomes a bridge. Not a savior, those burn early, but a builder of crossings where the river used to stop conversations. Transformation is never just private. When you decide to step into your life, quiet revolutions begin around you. Not through preaching is loud fear, but through the unscandalous force of example. Someone watches you make the call with your voice shaking, and their phone becomes lighter. Someone sees you apologize to a child for the first time anyone has apologized to them, and their definition of adulthood changes. Someone hears your music and remembers that their father sang before work, and the city suddenly sounds less like a machine. Potential realized is contagious in the way hearth fires are. One home lit makes the street safer. Still, you will relapse into that old cramped posture. Good. Freedom that can be lost by a bad morning was never freedom. Practice in this direction is ritual, not conquest. When the voice says, "Who do you think you are?" answer plainly with a verb. I am learning. When the body tightens at the threshold, take 3 breaths borrowed from forests that never once apologized for their height. When you fear the envy, bless the person you envy and steal the information. When your council of inner voices votes no, thank them for guarding your childhood and tell them you are not a child. Build structures that suit a living being, not a legend. A schedule with air, a goal with margins, a circle that tells you jokes, a room that holds silence when the work refuses to obey the plan. Replace the spotlight with a campfire. Invite collaborators. Let your work become a place where people eat. The heat will feel different when it is warmth rather than interrogation. Say aloud the losses that stand between you and your larger life. Name the rituals of belonging you'll break and invent new ones. A Sunday dinner moved to Wednesday. A friend who will be your witness, not your guard. A promise to call home even as you build home elsewhere. Ceremony disarms fear by refusing to let change masquerade as betrayal. If you can bear it, reconsider what you have been calling humility. Often, humility is the courage to be seen as you are in process, not the performance of smallness. It is the willingness to let others hold opinions of you while you keep your hands on the clay. It is the refusal to outsource your self-respect to reaction. When you no longer need to be unanimously approved, the vote that matters most, the one held inside your own ribcage, can pass by a clear majority. Meet the past without kneeling to it. There are histories that make your throat raw to mention. The teacher's sarcasm that wounded an early manuscript, the older sibling's smirk, the lover who laughed the first time you danced. Do not argue with these ghosts. Invite them to sit while you work. Let them watch you move anyway. They may heckle. They may quiet. Over time, even ghosts get bored of repeating themselves if you stop believing that their words are law. Redefine risk, not as exposure to catastrophe, but as exposure to life. The catastrophe is already here. The day that passes unattempted, the talent that mummifies under politeness, the friendships never formed because you insisted on the mask. Risk is a threshold masquerading as a cliff. Most of the time you step down into a room, ankle deep with possibility, and realize you are rehearsing for a fall that never arrives. Yes, there will be days when the water is higher than your comfort. That is why you learn to swim with others around you. Let the work be the teacher. Stop interviewing your fear about what is possible. Put your hands on the instrument, the beam, the kill, the code, the earth. Let your muscles become intelligent in the old way. Wisdom is tactile. The mind will catch up if you feed it proof that you did not die from being seen, that the envy did not drown you, that the family still loves you in their way, that the room you feared entering had windows and a chair. The mind trusts evidence more than sermons. Make a pact with yourself to be a participant more often than a commentator. You will not always succeed. The age we live in pays well for commentary. Commentary gives you the feeling of motion without the risk of movement. Refuse most of it. When you are tempted to critique from the sidelines, write one page of your own. When your thumb scrolls toward someone else's ceremony, close the phone and make a small one. Light a candle, draw 2 lines, hum a note. Remind your animal that life is in here, not out there. The last superstition to break is the idea that your potential must be heroic to be real. Perhaps your gift is not a stadium. Perhaps it is 3 chairs in a kitchen where despair goes to drink water. Perhaps your genius is bureaucratic in the holy sense. The person who can translate the muddled vision of a room into steps people can take. Perhaps your capacity is not a lightning strike, but a steady current. Great. The world is not starving for lightning. It is starving for power that stays on. You will know the shift has occurred when you stop announcing your plans and begin to have a day. Not an ideal day. A day with coffee and confusion and 5 inches of progress. A day where you disappoint someone and do not use it as evidence against your right to try. A day where you send the email like a person who understands that the internet is not God. A day where the voice that says later meets the hand that says now. It is tempting to ask for one final blessing before you cross the threshold. There is none. There is only the door you have already touched 100 times. There is only the life that keeps clearing its throat in the corner. There is only the season turning with or without your consent. One day soon you will surprise yourself by stopping in the middle of an old ritual, sharpening the pencil again, rearranging the stack of possibilities, and you will step into the work like stepping into a river. Cold at first, then bearable, then necessary. Then you will have to laugh, because all those years you feared the current, and the current is simply how water moves. Afterward, others will ask how you did it. You could tell them stories about courage and plans and books. Or you could tell them the truest thing. I got tired of arguing. I decided to be in my life while I have one. I decided my loyalty belonged not to my smallness, not to the ghosts, not to the voices policing my orbit, but to the capacity life put in me for reasons.